Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories.
I hope DB's other victims were able to recoup some of their losses.
But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go.
How my dad conned a con man, then ruined his conning business. Years ago, shortly after I moved out, my dad decided he wanted to remodel his bathroom and hired a local contractor to do it, who I'll refer to as DB. He'd previously fixed a clogged sink for him. From the start, my dad was extremely skeptical of contractors and did not want to get scammed. So after they agreed on a price for labor, my dad asked him for an invoice for the cost of all the materials. He took said invoice to one of his coworkers whose brother-in-law was a plumber or in construction or something to look over the list of materials to see if the quote was fair. And right off the bat, DB was trying to do close to a 50% markup on the materials. So instead of paying DB's invoice, my dad just bought all the materials himself, saying he knows a guy who gives him amazing discounts. So DB doesn't get suspicious that my dad was onto his game. After 3 months, the bathroom's not even close to being done, despite DB telling him it'd take 2 months. My dad had to travel for work and be gone for a week, so he asked me to house sit and make sure that DB shows up to work and does not steal anything. Right off the bat, DB tries to be all buddy-buddy with me, but I didn't like the guy, so I just brushed him off, asked him how the bathroom was coming. Over the course of the week, DB tried to upsell me on a bunch of things he said needed to be done to finish the bathroom. Most of it was electrical work, which he didn't have a license for. My dad filled me in before he left about what was quoted in the labor, and there was no electrical work quoted, and I told him, nope, just stick to the original quote. Once my dad comes back, I filled him in on all the additional charges DB tried to tack on. He also didn't show up for 3 days, saying he hurt his shoulder tripping over his cat. Then he tried to install the new ceiling light, which he was not asked to install because we had an electrician coming to install it. After a heated discussion between DB and I, he stopped installing the ceiling light and started laying tile, during which he broke a quarter of the tiles. After this debacle, my dad did some investigating and looked up DB's license and found that not only was the license expired, it didn't belong to DB. So my dad asked my brother and I to come over when he was going to confront DB about lying about his license. A very heated argument broke out when my dad refused to let DB enter the house to collect his tool and said we would bring the tools out to him. DB then threatened to press charges against me for assault when I accidentally brushed his shoulder when I was passing him in the hallway, and I refused to apologize. After the cops showed up, DB quickly tried to play the victim, but the cops told DB to collect his tools and leave. The bathroom still unfinished, my dad did not have to pay DB for his 3 months of labor and used that money to hire real contractors to finish the bathroom. It only took them a week and a half. After this, my dad contacted the local news to tell them about DB being a con man. A few months later, the news did an investigative story about him and found other people that DB had scammed, where he'd start work on their bathrooms, but once he got paid, he would cut and run, leaving the bathroom unfinished and stealing the materials. The news then set up a sting for DB and exposed him for being a con man, and he was arrested not long after the news story aired. And our second story. Credit card skimmer gets what he bought with my card, and a bit extra. This story starts off with a slightly less humorous fact. A few days ago, I was the unfortunate victim of credit card fraud. The fraudsters decided to take my credit card info and purchase $1,000 worth of car parts from Philadelphia and have it sent across the border to the city I currently live in Canada. Normally, this is where the story ends. Sometimes they get away with it, sometimes they don't. But either way, my card is replaced and I continue on living my life. This, however, is where the fun starts happening. I get a call in the morning about a DHL shipment entering the country that's required customs to be paid. Knowing I haven't shipped anything with DHL in forever, they're the worst, I quickly come to the realization that it must be the fraudsters shipping their goods here. It can't be, I thought. Who in their right mind would use a stolen card to order something to their own house in the city the owner of the card lives in? After a brief chat with DHL about the customs fees I would not be paying, I managed to obtain the address the package was being sent to. I hemmed and hawed about it, but eventually decided the best thing to do was call the local police department and let them know what was up. I told the officer all about the situation, that unfortunately I did not know what car the parts were for, and that I hope this info helps them somehow in the future. He tells me that the chances are slim, but he'll swing by the house, it's literally 15 minutes from my own, just to see if anything weird is going on and follow up with me if he needs to. I thank him and go on with my workday. About an hour later, I get a call from the same officer, obviously excited. "Hi, Entitledparents, it's Officer X. You'll never guess what just happened. I was following up on the report and drove by the house. I decided to knock on the door just to see if anybody was home and ask them a couple questions. A man opened the door, and as we were talking, DHL drove up to deliver the package." Yeah, that's right, the exact package we'd been discussing. The delivery driver walks up to the door and says, "Hi, is Entitledparents here?" To which the man replies, "Oh yeah, he's downstairs." You can imagine my surprise. That's pretty funny because I just got off the phone with him and I know for a fact he doesn't live here. The guy, no joke, looked me dead in the face and goes, "Oh, whatever, the package is paid for." I chuckled and turned to the DHL driver to tell him he should leave because I need to make an arrest. "I'm calling you while I drive back to the precinct. Thought it might brighten your day." I still can't believe they caught the guy, but thought it was a story that was too good not to share. And our next story. Switch purchase, switch jobs. Back in 1983, my high school library was a bit of a joke. It seems we never had more than 2 copies of any book the county put on its required list. What this meant was that everyone was frantically trying to get the same books to complete papers with. Before I could drive, this meant getting my poor mom to drive me to every library in the area. One day, our library started asking for volunteers to do a fundraiser to get more materials, and namely, more copies of the required books. Some of us jumped on board and sold everything from donuts to coupons. We would hold bake sales, car washes, etc. We were elated at the end of the drive when we had far exceeded our goals. We were all promised that we would have our dreams realized over the summer. The school year starts up, and we're giddy to see the new books. Imagine our dismay when we get to the library and find that most of the books are gone. Bare shelves glared at us while we went along the rows. That's when we noticed the holy grail of the library was missing, the card catalog file. In its place, 2 computer terminals. Mind you, not computers. We went to the front desk and asked the librarian what was going on. She said they'd decided to get a fancy computer system to make her job easier and cut down on theft. We were stunned because we didn't have a theft problem. Certainly some books would get lost or damaged, but not very many. The books were mostly missing because they'd been sent to a company to have security embedded in them. The worst part is the librarian overspent and therefore, you guessed it, was not able to purchase more books. We felt the shame of being used, lied to, and screwed over. It was at this point that we knew revenge was in order. It took myself and a couple of my fellow computer nerds 15 minutes to figure out what they'd done to the books. The security tag was a RF, like at a store, and the card pocket of the book. The new cards themselves had metal foil in their center. Without this foil, the tag would receive energy from the newly installed gates at the library door and set off an alarm. I decided to test our knowledge. I grabbed a reference book, threw a gum wrapper in the pocket, shoved it in my bag, and hit the door. I passed out the door without a peep from the gates. After that day, we threw our plan into action. We would steal as many books as we could and hide them in any location we could find. At first, we used storage rooms by boxing them up and soon ran out of space. We then started using empty lockers and even putting them in the ceiling on top of divider walls. By the end of the year, the librarian was getting frantic. She could not balance her inventory with the new computer system, and she was being called out on it thanks to our many complaints. Another genius move was to have the boxes labeled as other textbooks and sent to the warehouse over the summer. This was easy to do since we were the volunteers that wrote the program to do it, and we would print the labels. The librarian ended up losing her job and being investigated for fraud since there seemed to be some missing funds as well. Over the summer, the county finally spent the money to fill our book requests due to the uproar. It was not until a week before the start of school that they started discovering library books in the extra boxes several teachers received. This was just the beginning of us getting our revenge on some of the teachers. In the end, we got our revenge and the original items we worked so hard to get.
And our last story.
Take my parking spot that I just dug out? Fine, I'll bury your car. This happened a couple years ago. It had snowed a bunch, so I went out to clear a spot for my boyfriend at the time for when he got home from work, police officer. I spent a while digging it out, and as I was finishing up, some girl drove up and parked in it while I was still shoveling it. I told her that I just dug it out intending to use it and asked her to move. She didn't. She then got out of her car and walked away. Turns out she lived 2 buildings down, so she normally wouldn't park there anyway. Our complex had a mini snowplow, and the dude was plowing in the area and saw all this go down. He helped me move all the snow from the pile he just created and put it around her car. We buried it up to the door handles on all sides. He then dug out a new spot for me. Saw her later trying to dig out her car. Turns out she didn't have a shovel. So naturally, because I'm petty, I went out and reshoveled the sidewalk from the lot up to our building and threw all the snow on her vehicle while I did. Then went inside and took my shovel with me. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.